I pull down a avatar from there. So okay, so I think it's getting started. So it'll probably start in a moment here. All right, so now we're live. So I will I'll do some cutting to get it all set. So all right, so nice to connect. I'm glad we got a chance to hop on here.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me.
And like I said, this is just super fun. I'm happy to kind of finally connect. I had a chance to try out your food, the dumplings that you made, and I think our initial connection was through Jen, the Renaissance Collective.
Mm-hmm.
And so would love to sort of chat about kind of your experience with them so far and what you're doing with the dumplings and kind of anything else that comes up. Super
cool.
Super freeform. So how did you originally get connected to Renaissance Collective?
I don't know. It's I don't remember.
You're like reading something online?
Yeah,
or?
I think it was through LinkedIn actually.
Oh, okay.
So your Jen's network is so broad and extensive. It's both broad and deep, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
so I think that somehow we connected that way, right? With our networks intertwined at some point. And I saw some posts about this cool group called Renaissance Collective.
Right.
And it was it was basically a call out to generalists. And I am nothing but a generalist.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that sort of how you've always seen yourself throughout your career?
It's funny. I think it's just more towards my nature, right? And not even in towards a professional slant, but my interests are a lot. They're varied, random, and kind of all over the place in free form. So
how did your kind of interest or curiosity to try lots of things come about? Was that something that you grew up with, or that your parents fostered, or something that you kind of came up with yourself?
I don't know if my parents fostered that per se. I think just lack of attention, lack of ability to focus. No, but in all seriousness, I think just a lot of things interest me. And I think it is a skill, right? It's like, oh, that interests me, and then I'll go and kind of chase it for a while, and if it actually continue, if it still calls to me, then I'll actually further it, right? So I can quickly cut bait. I guess that's a feature. That's a good thing for generalists, right? So
yeah. Are there certain topics that you have cut bait on quickly? Like you dive in, you get, I don't know, a week in or a month in, and then you're kind of like, actually, no, this is not for me.
It's funny. It's I think this is a very generalist type of response. Anything that's very technical, I tend to get very interested in, and then as it gets more difficult and technical, I tend to, the initial euphoria tends to wear off pretty quickly. So I actually, a couple months ago, I started revisiting calculus. I'm like, I didn't do so well in college, and I just never really cared. And I'm going to go. I can't remember which free online service it was, but I started, going through it, and I went through, a good week's worth. And as it just got more and more trigonometry focused and, requiring some level of, math acumen, I cut bait quickly.
Did you come to it with like a kind of a goal in mind of what you would do with calculus, or how did you sort of? You just sort of. It sounds like you were just thinking about calculus.
Yeah, it was more like. It was actually around the beginning of the shelter in place, right?
So this was kind of your quarantine hobby.
Yeah, it was like, okay, well, I need to do so. I kind of feel like I need to move the brain somehow, and calculus has always been a bugaboo for me. It's just been one of those things that, I don't know if you read Angela Duckworth. What's the book called?
Grit.
Yeah, Grit, right? And the thing that struck me was that she majored in the subject that she was the worst at. and like she wanted a pound on that. And I was like, huh, that's actually pretty admirable in a really weird and crazy way. And so
Right.
that's always kind of stuck with me. And the one big thing, or the one big subject that's always been that block for me was calculus. So it was kind of something to do, right? But not, but actually would have some sort of utility, whether it was a professional or just intellectual utility. So that was so that's where it started, right? And it was kind of like, okay, well, it was a personal challenge, right? You know, if I can get over this, then that would, you know, I don't know if it would actually say something about me or if it'd make me feel better as a person or whatever, but
Right.
you know.
And then, you know, what are your other kind of like top 5, I don't know, kind of, you know, interests or things that you sort of dabbled in as a generalist, or like whether they're hobbies or professional, kind of what comes to mind is kind of just the things that you like to dabble in.
You know, so it's funny. It's like, so definitely food, right? You know, a lot of body work. So I watch, I was telling my wife this last night, like the things, I'm on YouTube all the time, right? And so the things that I watch like cooking stuff. I watch technology stuff, specifically geared towards like the PC industry and things like that. Kind of, it actually intersects with my work anyways, but I have a general interest in that. And then so like massage, chiropractic, any sort of like body work, I'm really into, right? Just for my own, you know, sanity and things like that. You know, meditation, you know, and I guess, you know, I don't necessarily love the label, but self-help, right? Things like that. You know, and I guess, you know, for the 5th one, you know, something that I've been really looking at is like gardening, right? You know, and I guess it's because I'm, you know, a hippie in that sense. Like if I'm going to do food, I want to, you know, I want to grow my own and I want to source it properly. And
So when you say gardening, you mean a lot of like veggie or kind of consumable kind of gardening?
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, I have, you know, I don't have enough sun in my house. Okay, so how can I actually, you know, plant basil?
Right,
you know,
right.
things like that, or tomatoes or things like that, right? So,
right. Have you talked to Jen about this? She's
I
kind
have
of the same
not
way.
actually.
Oh, yeah. She has a big planter and she like plants all kinds of a lot of like herbs and like I remember there's like mustard, garlic, or sorry, mustard greens and definitely kale and you know just like a whole host of I don't know does dill grow around here? I think maybe she was growing dill and definitely basil.
Yeah.
So yeah.
A dill, I would figure dill would be one of the easier ones. I don't
think
know.
so, yeah. So she's been doing a lot of that. And obviously, I don't know if you have connected on the cooking stuff, but she's also big in cooking. So as a hobbyist though, so it sounds like you are. So I've actually had your dumplings, and it sounds like this is kind of a newish hobby or business, or what's the state of the dumpling stuff these days?
You know, to be I guess pretty forward about it. It's as much I give it as much attention and care and love as I can afford to, right? Based on, you know, responsibilities as father, husband, and also my day job, you know, in tech.
And your day job is unrelated to
completely
cooking or food or anything.
So I'll give you the, you know, the 5-second spiel on that. So I'm the director of marketing at a software startup called Elliptic Labs. So I'm very busy with that. And so, you know, of course, and this was also born, you know, the dumpling idea was also born out of, you know, COVID quarantine type, you know, ennui, I guess. I don't know. You would,
so is it all kind of new this year? Like you had not been making dumplings before?
Like in June. Oh no, I you know, I mean, we you know, we made dumplings as a family.
Like as a hobbyist family for yourself.
Yeah.
And now thinking about it as like a business or a new brand or new product, that's June.
Nah, I mean, you know, I mean, I would say 12 years ago, I actually put together a business plan for a dumpling restaurant. And I had actually found the spot it was actually about 3 blocks from where I live it's the Halu spot, the ramen place on Clement and 8th. So
Mm-hmm.
I was about a week late in putting an offer in for that space.
Mm.
And the kicker was that I actually was good friends with the owner. I didn't even know that she was selling it.
Mm.
And so I found out a week too late. So it wasn't meant to be, I guess,
Right.
12 years ago. So
Right.
yeah.
Cool. So you're kind of in the Richmond area, is that?
In Richmond, yep.
And are
Really close
you
to you guys.
yeah, not
Yeah.
far at all. And are you kind of operating this out of, is it home, or do you work with commercial kitchens, or how
It's
do
home right
you
now
start doing this?
because it's home right now because it's sorry for interrupting.
No, no, sorry.
It's home right now just because the volumes are low, and um, you know, I it's kind of like we're kind of seeing how it's going to go, what the
Mm-hmm.
response is, what kind of time do or are we going to have, um,
Right.
and I think right now it's really trying to make the operations much more efficient, right?
Mm-hmm.
While maintaining, exacting standards, or,
Mm-hmm.
maybe just like, psychotic standards.
Right.
Um,
Are you sort of a
being able to,
perfectionist about everything you're doing here?
absolutely. It's, yeah, overly so.
Mm-hmm.
I actually I had a conversation with a really smart friend of mine, and he said, look, don't romanticize it. You're making dumplings, it's okay, right? And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
but I always harken back to, I forget the Japanese word for it, but basically it's the Japanese artisans, like the ramen makers, or the
Mm-hmm.
sushi chefs, or where it's ingrained, right? And they're constantly working towards perfection. They already acknowledge that perfection doesn't exist, right? So it
Mm-hmm.
does not, you cannot reach it, but it's the one thing that you're going to strive for in
Mm-hmm.
every day and everything that you do, right? Whether it's, lessening, taking one less step,
Mm-hmm.
to the kitchen because you figured a way to optimize your movement,
Right.
to save that 1 second, or,
Mm-hmm.
cut, cutting off 3 centimeters from your, cutting motion, or, it's that, like, that the psychotic focus on the minutia, right? And
Uh-huh.
optimizing just those little things. Um, I,
Yeah.
it, I frankly, I don't apply that to practically anything in my life, but for some reason with this dumpling thing, like I've really started to, like, I'm going nuts over, like even a half percentage of dough hydration, for
Mm-hmm.
example, right? And like
Right.
and like we're talking about half grams of salt, and so I'm like thinking about investing in a jewelry scale so I can actually get the,
Mm-hmm.
the micro units of a gram versus, the
And is
milligrams.
this kind of perfection seeking? Is this with the dumpling thing? This is the first time you've done it, even with your cooking? Like
Yeah, pretty
cooking stuff
much.
you've done kind of more ad hoc or for fun?
Oh, my food, like when I cook at home, like for the family, I go for 5 ingredients or less and 30 minutes or less.
Hmm. Nice.
So,
Hmm.
and it turns out well, but it's just like if I see a recipe that's overwrought, like too
Yeah.
many steps, too many ingredients, I'm like, yeah, never mind. So
Right.
yeah. But again, like for some, for the dumplings, maybe it's because I have I have this preternatural need to please people. So like when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to, having it served to people who are actually paying for it, or customers, or, even giving it away, like I have this thing where it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I want to, or I have this need
Yeah.
to over analyze every angle of it.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah.
So I'm interested in kind of, what you're, I guess, almost like the process, or what you imagine this. Is it more that you imagine this could be something, and then you're kind of taking step one, or are you kind of just doing the next thing that you want to do, or how do you think about sort of the whole process of dumplings, or a dumpling business, or however you want to think about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I vacillate, frankly. You know, uh, going in, I didn't want to put too many expectations on it, right? Because it's
Hmm.
I've always wanted to do it a little more organically. Um, really focusing on just making the best dumplings I can, right? And
Hmm.
then bringing that out to the world, and then having it become an iterative process of making it better, and learning what people actually like, don't like, what they want, what they don't want. And kind of having it like grow from there, right? And
Yep.
because I tend to put too much stress on things, especially this
Hmm.
nature, and I tend to think too big,
Yep.
right? And
Yeah.
so that with those two things in particular, stress and thinking too big, I mean, that's immediate burnout, right? Like
Right.
once you hit one road bump, you're like, screw it.
Mm.
There's a failure, you suck, it's the worst, and then you just throw it away, right?
Well, I actually I like the idea of being able to balance the two a lot, because I do see, like, I feel like I meet lots and lots of entrepreneurs, usually kind of tech focused, not as many people in the food industry, but I think from the kind of the meta principle is the same, which is I think people either often get really, really good at the long term and the big vision and kind of the ambitious
Hmm.
plan, and then the long term planning blinds the person to like what is the next step to take.
Yeah.
And so then you end up taking like lots of confused steps, and it's kind of a big waste or a mess. And then I think the opposite also occurs, which is like somebody's like, well, I'm just like doing this thing and I want this thing, so I'm going to make this. And
Yeah.
those can be great and they can be useful, but then sometimes they get stuck into
Right.
small places. I think the real magic is when you can kind of marry the two. So, I
Yeah.
almost think it's like a good characteristic if you both, I mean, I don't think you should force yourself to see something much bigger than than you sort of naturally do. But if you
Right.
both have something you're excited about longer term, but you also are so focused on like, what am I doing kind of next hour
Yeah.
to take steps forward there?
No,
It's a nice pattern.
it's very true. I when you mention it, I liken it to, in the software world, especially, right? Like it could just be one minute little problem to solve, right? And
Yep.
you're so focused on the immediate that, you spend a week creating this one product that solves one very specific problem for one very specific person for one
Yep.
very specific use case, right? So no, I hear you. I mean, that's why I said I kind of vacillate, right? Because the other part of it is, and that's why I'm very cognizant of like I tell myself, just, rein it in, right? Don't go
Hmm.
too big, and
Yep.
but one of the things that I've really been thinking about is potentially turning this into a tech play, right?
Hmm.
And building a robot to do
Hmm.
it. Now there already making, there are already machines out there that do it, but it's
Right.
it's I mean, from if you can watch any video, I mean, they're sloppy.
So
They're
why make a robot then? What do you imagine that
so
would accomplish?
so again, this is where I start thinking big and like going nuts and crazy, right? So I think for dumpling, so there's two things. So I'll start with this one. I don't know. I haven't been to the place, but I've read a lot about it. There's a hamburger place that actually built a robot
Oh, creator.
creator, yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that idea. And what was cool was I looked at the website, and I looked just to poke around, and it's like, oh, careers. I'm like, well, I wonder what they're looking for.
Hmm.
Embedded software engineer,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
things like that, right?
Right.
AI, machine learning. And that's kind of the stuff that I'm, in my tech life.
Hmm.
We're doing a lot of, I mean, it's kind of hard not to at this point, but we're doing a lot of
Yeah.
stuff around machine learning and AI, right?
Hmm.
And so I think it's very fascinating. I mean, it's obviously the way to go. And if I'm always looking to make everything more efficient and what
Yep.
have you, right? And so that part of tech really coincides and is a nice connection to what we're doing. Same
Right.
thing with the idea of a robot, right? Like, so for dumplings, I would say worldwide they're very popular, right?
Hmm.
Across cultures, across palettes,
Right.
across whatever you want to call it, right? So in of itself, dumplings, I think, are very portable, as a
Hmm.
concept, as a product, right? Now,
Hmm.
to do a dumpling machine, that is also then very portable, but it's also it actually you can actually use it for a couple of things, right? It could be the center case of a retail shop, right? Or a restaurant, right?
Right.
Not even, a sit down, a takeout thing. It could be an educational thing. Or you could actually do it for, like a highly mechanized factory, right? And so
Right.
you have a few different models or a few different, ways to I don't know, sales avenues to go about pushing
Right.
the machine, right? But I would apply different things to it, right? Because right now, if you just it's funny. What was the Lucky Peach? They actually did like kind of a mocking video of how to use it, and it's grainy, right? And it's like it looks like it's from the 70s or 80s, and they try to actually use one, and it's a complete disaster mess, right? And it's because they're just unwieldy. And so, like a la Creator, right? Make something beautiful, make something that you can have in the front, but also make it highly customizable, or make it so you can actually create a highly customizable end product.
So let me push back a little bit on this robot idea.
Yeah,
because,
please do. I love it. Please do. Because my friend has also pushed back on me. He's like, don't do it. It's like, you're being ridiculous.
Well, yeah, I think the idea, I mean, I think it's always good to like try to dream and brainstorm and try to figure out like what is there. But so this pushback is more meant to like explore the space of robots and kind of values that might be around that. It's not specific to kind of dumpling industry or something, but or like Creator, for the example, the hamburger industry. So, I think that I always think of robots as really good at making a process very efficient and getting efficiency out of a process. But the best customer of a robot is going to be somebody who has a process that's inefficient. And so that customer is always going to have to decide, like, how inefficient is my process, and can I get additional value to my entire kind of customer experience by purchasing or owning a robot. And so if you want to build a robot for dumplings, I think the best leverage would be to own a retail brand for dumplings. So if you own the customer relationships, everybody loves your dumplings, everybody wants more dumplings, and it's too expensive for you to make them or you to hire all the right people to execute the craft in the way you want, then I think you could say, like, actually, we have a solution to that, and it's this robot, and you spend a year, whatever it is, building that. And then you get there. But I think if you start by building the robot and you don't really have a channel, then you have to kind of sell the robot to somebody else who has the channel. And that entity is kind of saying, well, we have a process, it works. Now we have to like compare cost. Is your robot going to really help us save that much money, and how much are we going to pay for the robot? And then I think you end up getting kind of, you end up getting sort of any margin that you might have, it's going to get crushed unless it's like everybody in the world needs these things. So I think for the thought experiment of McDonald's versus Creator is like, is McDonald's not smart enough to build a robot, or are they working on like a different set of constraints and challenges with kind of how they operate their business? I think if there was like a tremendous amount of efficiency, and I mean, it's obviously a very different experience. The Creator, I've been in their retail experience. It's amazing. It feels nothing like a McDonald's. So it's not to discount all of the work that they've done, but I almost I'm familiar with the I don't know if it's still on this Eatsa. Do you know Eatsa?
Yeah, that's a step too far.
Well, what part of it?
I think Eatsa is a step too far from the robot because it's so cold and impersonal. It's because you walk into a room with just doors or just little lockers, and then you stand around and
So I guess, but the reason I was going to mention Eatsa is I think it's, if you want to build a new restaurant brand, I think there's stuff to learn in what they're doing. Or if you even want to build a new robot, I think there's stuff to learn in what they're doing, like a food robot, which is they create some sort of customer experience, and then they have like a nice handoff or interface point to where the robot would exist. And then they hire people to execute the stuff the robot would otherwise do, and they make sure they own the brand and the customer experience and the whole like, all the touch points. And then they can build the efficiency in because their touch points were designed around that. Whereas like, I think if you take like an existing restaurant and try to build robot kind of handoffs, you get in the way of a lot of like existing workflows. So it's not like it couldn't be done. Like if it was super valuable, actually it would be. I think you'd see McDonald's invent this like overnight if it were really going to help them get a lot of efficiency. But I think, so far, I don't think it's a problem that McDonald's can't do machine learning well or something. I mean, like they can hire people who are very talented at such things. But I think they just don't, I think they probably have done the analysis. I mean, I don't know for sure, but my guess is that it doesn't yet make sense for them given the cost of them to manufacture the robots and build them. Mm-hmm. But I think the Eatsa model of own the customer experience, I'm not that it has to be this impersonal, handoff cubby with iPads and stuff. You could actually have people in the restaurant, but that the whole workflow and experience of production is designed around the assumption that there will be robots in these steps. And, because robots are expensive and take forever to produce, I mean, not forever, but they take some real time investment. You actually can, fake the robot through human, and it's not very efficient, but you at least get to try it out, So if you wanted to build a dumpling making robot, I still think step one is make your dumplings, build your dumpling brand. And then, maybe a year or two in, you're like, actually, there's too much demand for this. I can't keep up with it. It'd be so much more efficient if I could run and operate my own robots. That then starts to sound, interesting, I'd say. But I think you could end up wasting a year or two, trying to get all the best machine learning people together to kind of look at, computer vision and, build this robot. And then you end up like, well, actually, we haven't really got,
no one wants it.
We don't really have the demand, so we have to sell this robot to other people who have the demand, and that's kind of an awkward conversation.
Right. Exactly. And so I think you elucidated very elegantly, like why I'm, like just focus on, the product first, focus on building the, and then worry about everything else. Right. And frankly, the whole robot thing, I mean, I really like it from a kind of an elegant solution type perspective. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But a lot of it is also born out of my laziness and my reticence in having to manage a lot of people. Right. So it isn't so much. I mean, I can't say that it's it's not being born out of some place that's that's, I don't want to say valid or good, but just there's a lot of steps before that's even a realistic or valuable. Okay, good. So conversation.
I think actually the steps you're taking are actually the best steps. If there is a robot opportunity someday, you'd actually want to do exactly what you're doing today to discover that that's a possibility.
Oh yeah, no. So I it's like, and the other part is the only reason why I'm thinking, again, like I said, like I'm lazy, right? And so at this point, I mean, ideally I would be making 200 or I'd be making 800 dumplings a week. Mm-hmm. Right, but because
this is just you with your hands,
just me and my hands. Well, and a stand mixer.
Okay, but it's not like you have a staff of people helping out.
It's just me, myself, and I, and and so I've for the first of my life, I bought a stand mixer, and it is like.
Is that like an industrial commercial kitchen type thing, or
just Bed Bath and Beyond?
Oh, okay. It's called stand mixer.
It's the KitchenAid. It's just a KitchenAid stand mixer, right? So I got one of those, and I grind my meat with that. Do my doughs with that. I actually paddle my fillings with that, and it's like it makes everything. I don't know. It's like it's the greatest thing ever, right? I'm just thinking, wow, I've not only saved myself so much time, I've saved my forearms and my wrists from pain.
Yep.
And everything is so much more consistent. And I'm like, and so that part of it is like, oh, well, imagine the economies of scale you can get with a robot.
Yeah. The wheels are turning.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But, but back to my original point, like if I'm making 800 dumplings a week, trying to do that, I mean, I either I see my kid or I make the dumplings kind of thing.
Right.
And so,
how is your kid at making dumplings?
He likes to do the pleats. right? So like, so he makes his fancy, and
Right.
I'm just like slam throw, right? Just like get him, just get him
Right.
off the line. So he'll, he's very intricate about his,
Right.
so he's very opinionated about pan fried versus boiled,
Mm. Mm.
so
Right.
yeah. I don't know,
That's
teaching
cool.
kids too young might not be a good thing, but
Like child labor laws probably get in the way at some point. It used to be that you were considered wealthy if you had, a dozen kids, because then they could help work the farm, and they're like productive capital assets.
yeah, not anymore, man. Yeah, they'll say, "Oh, alas, they're actually liabilities." Okay, I get it.
So tell me more about kind of how kind of the distribution or operation of this works, because I think you mentioned you were sort of looking at this retail space, and then kind of maybe you felt like you missed an opportunity, but maybe in COVID world that's actually better to not have kind of the retail lease and stuff. So do you imagine this, in your world? I guess I think the ones we had, I think you hand delivered to our home, right?
Mm-hmm.
So are you hand delivering all of them today?
Right now I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's I'm not, I wouldn't say that I'm suppressing the business right now, but I'm not proactively
Right. Yeah.
reaching out to people, right, to
Yeah.
push them to buy, right? And so and it's for that reason, right? So not only do I hand make everything, but then on the weekends I go and deliver them, right?
Right.
I mean, there are little efficiencies that I can, that I can do, or that I can implement to make everything a little easier for me. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, right now I have it open so anyone can select what time they want, right? And I just open it up. And I only, as a separate note, I only deliver Saturday and Sunday, right?
In San Francisco?
I actually have some folks in Oakland.
Okay.
So it's
San Francisco, Oakland, but
yeah,
you wouldn't go up
exactly.
to Marin, or you wouldn't go down to Peninsula or something?
I actually have someone in Sausalito, so it's actually within like an 8-mile radius, so it's
Got
okay,
it. Okay.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I just open it all up, right, to from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m., which is
Mm-hmm.
fine, right? But what I was thinking is, if I actually want to employ someone to actually do this, right, moving forward as I quote unquote scale,
Mm-hmm.
what I would do is then just open up two 2-hour blocks of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of do it like more like a FedEx, UPS, right? Give you a window and let you
Yeah.
select. Okay, so
Yeah.
Saturday you can accept delivery between 10 and 12, or 3 and 5, or 4 to 6, whatever two windows, right? And so
Right.
for me, then I could hire someone, and just say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, here are your 2 hours,
Yeah.
and I'll pay you whatever, 30-40 bucks to do that, and just
Mm-hmm.
and that just simplifies everything, right? Instead of saying,
Yeah.
okay, well, what have having to have someone on standby, and it's like, oh, this person wants it at 9, this person wants it
Right.
at 1, this
Right.
person
Right.
wants it at 3,
Yeah.
right? So it's kind of like, I'm too lazy to actually think of these things beforehand, so I kind of have to
Right.
run into the problems first to
Sure.
actually
Yeah.
then to problem solve.
Well, that's great. The phrase premature optimization is the root of all evil.
Well, there you go. I like that.
You won't run into any premature optimization. You're just like, I got no plan. Whatever happens next, I just respond to it. It's actually, I mean, from a software perspective, sometimes that's a better way to go. At least that's where I've seen it. Sometimes people end up seeing all these problems that could exist if so many customers show up or whatever, and it's like you can end up spending forever optimizing things that you don't actually get used. So I think the 2-hour windows seem like very reasonable. Do you imagine if this were to be operating at bigger scale, I'm trying to just try to get my head around what it could be or would be in your mind. Is it some sort of a delivery focused thing, or do you imagine that someday it would end up distributed through other retail channels, or kind of super open? Would it ever be something that I could order from like a Uber Eats, DoorDash, Postmates type, kind of for real time, or how do you imagine that works out?
So so it's funny, I have some kind of touch points, thresholds that I want to reach before I would actually get a retail space.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the idea, frankly, would be it's kind of like Kingdom of Dumpling,
Mm-hmm.
Over on Terraville, just
Yeah.
have a retail shop that you can come in and get, right? But my interest especially in Chinese food, go way beyond dumplings. So I
Mm-hmm.
kind of envision it being more like of a general store.
Mm.
But I mean, I live in the inner Richmond, right? So there are 20,000 amazing
Right.
grocery stores locally, right? But the one thing that
Yep.
we're missing that the market really wants is high-end artisanal stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you can't get, it's virtually impossible to get artisanal soy sauce, for example,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or
Right.
like local sesame oil, if such thing exists, right? These
Right.
types of things, right? I don't necessarily need to carry organic produce per se, right? Just because we
Mm-hmm.
have a farmer's market on Sunday too, right? So,
Yep.
but it's really focusing on those like the pantry type items, right? That people
Right.
can't get access to, or people want to learn about.
And is it kind of boutique artisanal? Is it speaking to kind of maybe your experiences, Chinese heritage, but
Yep.
kind of a tech worker, so a little more, you want the things more the luxe type
Yeah.
version of the thing that might otherwise, there might be
I think
equivalents that are available.
I think there's an appetite for it. In general, right? And I think it spreads across like economic, or whatever we want to call it, right? Whatever however much someone makes, right? I think,
Mm-hmm.
especially, I ran restaurants and I've worked with a lot of folks in the industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the food industry, and they make decent money, but they're not, I mean, they're not buying Teslas and houses everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But they know how to eat, right? And so they
Mm-hmm.
know how to appreciate, they know how to identify what's best, and then they know how to appreciate it and to procure it. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that so it doesn't run along like economic lines. I think that especially in
Mm.
San Francisco, which is a very food slash restaurant centric city, I think there's enough audience to be like, yeah, you know, yeah, I want soy sauce to be brewed from a master brewer.
Mm-hmm.
They've done it for 218 years, kind of thing, right?
Right. Right.
Because there's only a couple of places, and they're more wholesale.
Right.
And to get back to the original point, that would be a part of it, right? But for the dumpling piece, having them available, for retail for people to pick up. And this is to kind of tie back with the robot idea. If we can make them a la minute, so people can actually like take them home fresh
Mm-hmm.
versus just having to have them frozen, right?
Yep. Yep.
That would be an angle of it. I'm thinking, and actually Jen had mentioned this in one of our brief chats over Slack, doing like frozen kits, right? So like kind of
Mm-hmm.
pre-packaged things like that, like. And I was born in Hong Kong, so like the whole Chinese, the idea of the Chinese deli has always been, and the Chinese cafe is it's kind of almost a part of me, right? So like all the
Mm-hmm.
soup noodles,
Mm-hmm.
and having that just like, because making a bowl of, I don't know if you've had like the Chinese brisket noodles.
I'm not sure if I've had brisket noodle.
It's a very Hong Kong thing.
Hmm.
Anyway, so it's like, it takes like 4 or 5 hours to to steep and to cook, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just this laborious process, but obviously at scale it's fine, right? You can,
Yep.
it's still gonna take 5 hours, you're making 200 of them, right?
Right. Right.
And so being able to freeze that and then just be like, okay, here, you can put those in your freezer and you can make it tonight or whenever you want.
Yep.
And you can also, and the thing that I also love is not only the convenience, but also then, because I'm not washing your plates, you're not sitting down, and I don't have to hire a server. I don't
I
have
see.
to,
Yep.
I don't have to have a whole sit down experience and all the subsequent costs that are associated with that, right?
Right. So it's more a general store kind of
Yeah, and
bodega
yeah,
type
so you can
experience.
sell, so you can buy it for like way cheaper, right? Like just
Mm-hmm.
it's just a percentage more than what you would pay for the ingredients raw, right?
But this is like when I think about an area like the Richmond or Sunset, there's a lot of these kinds of corner store. Then I think they have, I'm sure they source ingredients or sort of the retail
Mhm.
products that they sell from many places that you probably couldn't get such a thing somewhere else. But at least my experience with the dumplings is like a pretty high end dumpling, right? You don't have to have to be able to afford a Tesla in order to have,
Yeah, exactly.
this dumpling, but it's not the cheapest dumpling you can get. It's not the mass produced or, kind of, it's not, maybe there'd be somebody who's more of a pragmatist who wants kind of the dumplings in the, the old way. And this is more like an elevated experience, if I understand correctly.
Well, it's it's so the pork is for example, right? The proteins are all heritage, right? So it's the pork, they're actually Berkshire or Kurabata, whichever whatever name you want to name it. And I triple grind them myself, right? And the beef, it's I forget it's a blend. It's two breeds, but again, I grind them myself. I triple grind, and I make everything by hand. I think that put it this way: if I had a retail shop, the prices would come down a touch too, right? Like,
I see.
Just because again, scale, I'd actually have a lot more space. I could actually, I think that's like one of the biggest limiting things for me right now is just space, right? I can't roll out and make like, I think I would have this, if I had the space, I probably would have the speed to be able to do like 100 at a time, right? I could actually do it without everything drying out or getting,
right.
maybe even 200.
But if you really nail this, this dumplings experience, which I think it does seem credible that you could reinvent dumplings and make them kind of more modern or elevated, is kind of the way I was describing. If you do that really well, it seems like there's it seems like you could also sell those in probably markets in LA that where this would be popular. Even markets like New York or across the country. There's probably appetite for those kinds of things. So how do you balance the idea of just like, if you get good at dumplings, just doing dumplings versus if you're doing dumplings and then you're also doing this general store and sourcing all these materials and operating a retail location, feels like there's a lot on your plate at that point.
Yeah.
Versus like just do the dumplings and make those more ubiquitous.
So that's why. So couple things. So I'm, at least in my head right now, I'm not looking to make this everywhere, right? Just because I'm so psychotic about the quality, right? And I've seen firsthand trying to scale restaurants or restaurant concepts to multiple units, and how much of a difficult task that is, right? So in my head, again, at least today, right now, I envision this kind of like as like a family type business, right? Like something just simple, pay for kids' school, maybe, if we do well enough, maybe, buy a duplex or something like that, or like a mixed use place, something modest, right? Just, to have be part of the community, and do something cool, right? Now, that doesn't mean, I mean, actually, I know Adrian over at 4-Star Seafood, and he actually did some testing, before I started shipping. And he actually said, yeah, when you get set up and you're in a commercial space, he said, yeah, I'd love to sell your stuff, right? And so, and actually it's something that I kind of thought about in the periphery, but it never really front and center. But when he told me that, I was like, wow, this is actually, it made me start thinking a little more like, as you mentioned, having more of a retail presence, or, using distribution, right? To actually business. I'm not, it's one of those things where I'm not closed off to anything, right? Like, again, this is part of my whole thing, reining myself
it's a
in,
fun
right?
process
Instead of like going after everything, right?
For
me, if I can make, my attitude kind of is at this point, if I can make the best dumpling that I can, like, these things will start to reveal themselves.
Right? I think that's a super healthy way to think about it.
Right. Just I mean, for example, another guy on Renaissance Collective, he reached out and said, hey, my wife and I are thinking about doing it. We were thinking about doing a dumpling business, and so like let's chat. I mean, that's the cool thing, and there's so many ways to go about this, right? And I kind of feel like if I target one now, it's limiting to the other opportunities.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's true that, getting too targeted could limit you. I guess my reaction to hearing this story though is that you are so passionate and so exacting about the dumplings, and the dumplings seem like an interesting enough thing to enough people that, almost like focusing on that feels to me like a place where you can just like get deeper and deeper and better and better. And the idea of running your own retail or general store feels to me like it could end up being a bit of a distraction relative to like, any given minute of the day you can only spend on like whatever your thing is. And if you can spend it getting better at dumplings, or improving the process, or maybe your initial idea is to get a delivery person for those 2-hour windows, maybe there's somebody you could hire to help with the manufacture assembly process, and you can still keep the quality bar the way it's kind of your exacting standard, but that you can do it to your spec, not just sort of throw it over and let somebody else solve the problem. Like you actually own the solutions and the kind of the editorial on it. But it doesn't mean, if 800, I mean, it sounds like a ton of work to me. If 800 is your weekly max, can you keep your quality level while getting somebody else to help augment your capacity? And those kinds of things, I think those types of trade-offs, and how you get your 2-hour windows to 3-hour, or you also serve, Berkeley and Oakland and South Bay, or even, it's not, probably sounds crazy, but LA or something, right? Where I bet there'd be like a big population of interest and appetite for this kind of thing, which comes with obviously its own set of complications. So I'm not suggesting get further afield even. I think what I'm kind of appreciating is, I think the focus that you're taking to this seems like really strong. Like I think it's like massively differentiated versus most people who kind of just go in and try to get something out there and try. I think it's like, so I'm almost saying like appreciate that, dig into this thing that you've got, and then almost like certainly I think your idea of being open to other things and kind of listening is good, but it feels to me like there's infinite work to expand your delivery windows and augment your manufacturing or assembly process, or I don't know how you'd call it. but even just doing those things just a little bit big, 50% bigger scale. So 800 you can handle. What about 1200? Can you keep the quality bar high? Can you create the processes that educate, manualize, and instructionalize how that gets done, and then source the right talent and figure out the right kind of operational process? And maybe there's even a location associated with that. I don't know. But there's just like, seems like infinite problems just to make that one thing great.
It's funny you position it that way, because that's how I think about it. These are problems. It's kind of going back to what we talked about at the beginning, right? It's like when certain things just fall by the wayside because they just don't interest me anymore, right? These problems that all the problems you outlined are things I've definitely thought about, and more than once. And but they fascinate me, right, on some level, or they're problems that I really want to solve. And I think that's it actually kind of surprises me, right? Like, I don't know, I mean, I can't say that, oh wow, I'm actually very interested in logistics per se, but when you juxtapose, or when you position it in reference to the business, it's like, okay, well, this interests me very much. It's like, okay, well, how can I ensure that the dumplings are still frozen, they don't chip, they don't break as I deliver it to so I guess I've also kind of learned a little bit more about that part of my this is actually something I really like, and it really interests me, because
maybe logistics in the abstract is not interesting, but like a specific puzzle that the goal and you can set the goal, that actually can be tremendously fascinating. It's kind of the way your mind wants to wrap around and work with it.
It's like however we rationalize it, I suppose.
That's cool. Do you have a name for the dumplings or the dumpling business, or some hypothesis on names, or what are the kind of brands that
so it's called the San Francisco Dumpling Company. The website's up. We have about 15, 16 folks who are subscribing to it right now. Oh, we didn't even mention that. So it's
Oh
a
yeah,
pure
subscription.
subscription service at this
Yeah,
point.
tell me more about that.
Again, this is more like it initially it was kind of like a thought experiment slash being lazy slash trying to build, to prove the concept out, right? So the idea is
Mm-hmm.
that, get enough people to commit to a subscription, so it's like, okay, well, I have a 800 dumpling run rate per week, and that's
Mm-hmm.
committed. And then from there, it's like, okay, well, then if I'm lucky enough and I'm working hard enough to get to that point, well, then let's build a wait list,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you can stack that, and then so that was that's part of my thinking, right? To the thresholds. If I
Yeah.
can build to get to that point, I have enough commitment, I have enough, and then I have a wait list, and then I can. That's something demonstrable to, again, if I wanted to hire someone else, if I wanted to go
Yep.
get a space, if I wanted to go raise money and turn this into like a big thing, if I actually
Yep.
wanted to build a robot or whatever, right? It's like, in my head, I always positioned it as like, and it would be easier to manage, right? Because then I would know
Yeah.
it would be uh consistent, but it would also be, what's the word, expected.
I could have some certainty.
Yeah, certainty. Yeah, it'd be certainty, right? To every weekend or every third Saturday, I would sell, 20 bags to this area, right? And like,
Right.
and so that's kind of that's the approach. Now, whether this is actually inhibiting business, I don't know. But it's just something that I just decided to
Is
do.
there is
Just
there
try it
something
out.
about dumplings and subscriptions that have natural pairings? Like, is there like maybe if a family would normally make dumplings on some regular schedule, if they
So
were into making it themselves?
so I grew up eating dumpling. My dad, he almost made dumplings every week, right? And so, but
Mm-hmm.
I was a latchkey kid, right? And so, uh, my parents were working till 9, 10 at night, and so, there'd be a frozen bag of dumplings, and and that I
Mm-hmm.
could always pull out. And so that was one of those things that, on an individual level, it's always brought me comfort.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of dumplings always brought me comfort. And so that's kind of my mentality. It's like, well, within a month, like, there's gonna be 2, 3 days out of the month where you just are exhausted, don't want to
Yep.
cook, don't want to think about it, but you still want to eat well and something delicious. And and you can always open the freezer and boom,
Yep.
you're like, oh, awesome, I still have some dumplings left, and throw them in the
Right.
water, and 10 minutes later you're eating.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it, and I appreciate you framing the question this way. Like, I think that is one of the things that lends itself to, a subscription service, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
just the way we live nowadays, right? It's like there's no time to cook,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to give that service to folks, to know that it's like, whether you buy 1, 2, 3, whatever, how many bangs, like at whatever interval, right, depending on how much you
Mm-hmm.
love them or whatever, it gives them a little comfort, right? It gives them a little peace
Mm-hmm.
of mind, and that they still have something nutritious, delicious,
Right.
convenient.
And can people, is it okay to freeze them, or does that
Yeah,
kind of lose
they're no,
that doesn't
they're
lose
delivered.
the,
They're delivered frozen, right?
they're
And
delivered frozen?
so,
Okay.
yeah, they're delivered frozen. So that's what they're meant. They're they're good for 2 months, right? Two, three
Right.
months.
Got it.
Um,
And do you
that's
think
all.
that yeah, I was gonna
Go
ask
ahead.
the customer type, or like your suspected early customer, do you think it's more, somebody who is attuned to the cultural importance or significance of dumplings, and they sort of have maybe had an experience on dumplings in their childhood, and it's kind of like a revisiting that? Or is it kind of a different type of persona that is maybe more optimizing on that kind of quick and easy to make and tasty kind of, I guess it's like carb plus protein plus veggie all kind of in a pack? So do you think it's more one or the other of those? Or I'm sure it probably serves each in different ways, but do you think there's like going to be a mass around one or the other?
Yeah, I think, at my price point and how I'm positioning them, I think it's more, to the lack of a better term, foodies, to
Hmm.
the people who
Yeah.
like want the, the better stuff, right?
Hmm.
Not saying other places aren't good stuff, right? I'm just, that I
Yeah.
hope that that's how my product is kind of
Yeah.
associated. Um, and so uh it kind of tangentially, but also to this point, like when I made these dumplings and I was recipe testing, I made sure that I kept a very traditional
Hmm.
flavor and perspective, right? So even though the skins are different, right? They have two colors and what have you.
Hmm.
Um, my main focus was, in terms of flavor, was always to make it like what it's what grandma made, right? It's what mom made, it's what dad made, and just make it like a little brighter, a little sharper, a little
Yeah.
cleaner kind of thing, right? But keeping that fundamental flavor. And so um I think irrespective of whether you had a Chinese grandma that made you dumplings or not, like I think you would
Hmm.
appreciate the flavors, if
Yeah.
it's a greenfield experience for you. I've had a lot of Chinese friends who taste them. They said this actually is very, I wouldn't say it was a Proustian type moment, right? But it was like, but it was, it did bring them memories, right? It's like,
Right.
this is what
Right.
homemade dumplings taste like, right?
Right. Right.
So I think that I think for my clientele, it would be kind of, it's that mix, right? Like people who are looking for good stuff, but
Hmm.
also, and again, there's so many, I mean, who in the Bay Area doesn't have a really good Chinese
Hmm.
friend? Right.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm sure that Chinese friend at some point has waxed poetic about Chinese food,
Right.
and more likely than not about dumplings in some way, shape,
Yep.
or form, right? And so
Yep.
there already is like a fundamental understanding and expectation for it too. So
Right. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I'm on the website right now. The art, kind of the photography is beautiful. So this is really, really nicely done. Did you do that yourself, or did you work
iPhone,
with
baby,
somebody that you know? Is
iPhone.
that right? These are all iPhone. Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
That's
They're
great.
all
Even
iPhone.
this,
Yeah,
I guess it looks like you're powered by Shopify. Are these
yeah,
like just out of the box templates that you
yeah,
were able to,
yeah.
wow, this looks amazing. I think like this little gallery at the beginning with the overlays, these are amazing. This makes me want to order some right now. Just kind of this. It's super cool.
It's funny. I'm this goes to speak how spoiled we are. I've actually had some issues with Shopify because I guess my use case is very unique in that they don't offer delivery only subscription like
Mm-hmm.
platforms, right? So it's like I've had to kind of, you
Right.
know, like
Kind
order
of
workflow
wedge it
wise,
in.
I've had to work it out. So
Is that I don't know too much. I mean, I'm familiar with Shopify at a high level, but I know there's like this whole ecosystem of plugins and stuff. Is that something that a plugin developer could build to solve your
well,
problem, or?
I no, because I've used I actually it's funny. I chose a subscription app, right? A third party app early on, but
Mm-hmm.
they went about it. I'm gonna get in the weeds a little bit here. Um, the way they approached it was they actually took over the cart, so they
Mm-hmm.
created their own cart, right? Now the problem is that if you want a delivery service that's kind of integrated with the shipping module that Shopify has,
Mm-hmm.
you actually need access to Shopify's cart.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that this third party like created a whole new cart completely messed up that integration piece. And so
Mm.
so literally the first week I had to like remove them, go to a whole nother
Mm.
one, another
Mm-hmm.
app and change the workflow. And, you know, uh, you live and learn, right? Like,
Right. Right.
I'm too lazy to think about these things beforehand.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But I listen to Seth Godin, right? And like, I've always, in the summer while I was doing all this recipe development, I was
Mm-hmm.
thinking like, okay, I kind of had a target. I'm like, okay, I want to start September,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to, that's where I'm kind of targeting, and I think I can get there, right? Nothing
Right.
firm, and
Mm-hmm.
but then I listened to him, and he said, ship, don't care,
Yep.
you're not going to do it. It doesn't matter. Ship.
Yep.
Like, success means you shipped. forget everything else except, that. And I heard that and I'm like, all right, enough talking, like, okay. And I just sent, and before I even had a chance to think about it, I put on Facebook, I'm like, I'm opening next week.
Great. Yeah.
And then like I did it, right? And so to kind of go back to that idea, it's like, that's why I didn't really want to overthink it, because then I'm like, because a proper way to do it was like, okay, well, let me QA this, let me figure out how to make, I'm gonna make 25 different orders with all these corner cases and this and that, and then I'm like, I can't do that, right? First of all, I hate doing that stuff, but secondly, if I did that, then it would be more excuse to not do it, right? So
and you just begin your learnings by having something there, right?
Yeah, so I just opened it, and I just, here I am.
That's cool. Well, this is amazing. I mean, I love hearing this story, because I think, a lot of people have, people talk about like a side hustle or like some idea or something they kind of want to start or play with, but whether it's food or technology or, all kinds of different categories. A lot of times content, a lot of times people want to start a newsletter, begin writing. And I think there's definitely like a lot of power in just beginning, which is cool. And I think the one you delivered us was in a Ziploc bag, if I know, as it wasn't, you didn't have to have a full design of the perfect packaging and work with some sort of packaging expert. You just like, you're going, right? And then you're learning along the way. So I think it's an inspiring story for people to hear. And I kind of applaud you on getting started.
Well, it's there's nothing. I think the worst thing to think is that you're static, right? Once you open, you are what you are. That's I mean, my list of things to think about, it actually continues to grow instead of actually being able to shrink it down, and the darn thing just keeps expanding. But I just keep reminding myself, it's like, well, again, these are thinking about these things should invigorate you and should excite you, right? And I guess if anyone is actually listening to this, and you're thinking about doing anything like this, I would say, if it doesn't invigorate you, if it's a big hassle or you don't like it or it's annoying to you, that probably is a good sign. Right? It's probably telling you something pretty important, right? So
I think it's so hard to be dispassionate enough to listen to the, I call it like, where is the energy in this thing? Like, what is kind of bringing you, what excites you? What do you wake up and you still want to think about? And I think we sort of sometimes, maybe we grow up in an educational system where you kind of have to do your homework, and you have to learn how to play the piano, and you have to, there's all kinds of like, you have to get such and such on a test. There's all kinds of hurdles and thresholds and almost like expectations that get set up. And so we learn the skill of how do you grind through something, even if you maybe aren't enjoying it or having fun. Not that everything has to be fully enjoyable. I mean, there are hard things you got to get through. But I think sometimes in the world of entrepreneurship here, if you're trying too hard and it really requires like heroics, to get it to like, to work, then it may just not be the right thing. You might just need to skate to where the energy is and just be like, okay, let go of all my expectations. And like, I'm just going to go here because that's what I feel like doing. And people, why do I feel like doing it? Because people ask me for it and they want it. And so there's like a conversation going there instead of just like me kind of lecturing or commanding what it should be. It's just like, I'm having that conversation with people.
Well, I think the key words, like just to simplify it to the nth degree, it's like have to. If you ever think you have to, then that's also very telling, right? Like, and I think that's also a good indicator for you, maybe just where you are, like spiritually or emotionally with the thing, right? Like there have been days where I'm like, oh, I have to do this with the dumplings, and I'm like, why am I? It's like, no, I don't. Like if I did. It's up to you, right? It's like if you put the crazy pressure to sell, X amount of money or whatever, that's on you. You created that. The universe, there isn't a manual.
Exactly.
This is your, like you create all this, right, for yourself.
Exactly. All right. Well, this is awesome. I'm glad we got a chance to hang and share this. I feel like I learned a lot about this business. I'm excited to keep participating. Hopefully, we can be subscribers or customers and kind of watch your journey from the sidelines here.
I appreciate it. This was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot too. I really appreciate your insights.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right.
See you around,
Take
Patrick.
care. Thanks, DK.